Everyone, now we'll move on to the third session of the day. We have with us Dr. Aftab M. Hussain for the invited talk on the topic LoRaWAN devices for IoT applications. Dr. Aftab is currently working as an assistant professor at International Institute of Information Technology, Hyderabad, and is the principal investigator of the Patriot Lab. He has more than 9 years of experience working with device fabrication, thin film characterization, and device testing, along with sensor applications in IoT and related areas. He has more than 80 publications, holds 4 granted US patents, and 4 others in various stages of filing. He is also a member of the executive committee of IEEE CAA-CDS Joint Chapter in Hyderabad. On behalf of everyone, I welcome you, sir, to deliver the talk.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's actually great that you guys are having this FDP on IoT. It's a very, very, an interesting topic, particularly given the current situation with the internet sort of having come up to a particular maturity in itself. People are now looking at ways in which we can actually use the power of internet to make our lives better, and I think IoT is probably going to be a very, very important aspect of that endeavor. Today I'll be talking about a very specific technology platform or a communication strategy that has come up specifically designed for IoT applications. It's called LoRaWAN, and it's basically part of a series of LPWAN technologies or low power wide area network technologies that are coming up to sort of cater to all of these the upcoming IoT applications. So if you look at LPWAN in wearables or in IoT, it's a generic term basically used for a group of technologies that will give you very low power, which means you will have longer battery life for whatever applications, IoT applications you're making. And in some cases, the battery life can be as high as 10 years, which basically means that you will never have to replace or recharge your battery at all. So the life of the battery and the life of the device that you're using, the entire system is basically the same. So you can purchase a device, switch it on, use it for the next 5, 10, 7, 10 years, and then basically throw away the entire thing as if you would use a table or a chair or anything else. So these kinds of technologies are very, very interesting. Of course, that is the low power side of it. There's a wide area side of it as well, which basically provides us access to very, very large areas with a very few number of gateways or routers, so to say, covering a particular area. So for a limited number of gateways or infrastructure, we are able to cover a very, very wide area. So for a cityscape or something, we wouldn't be, or a countryscape, we shouldn't be requiring very, very large number of routers or some kind of switching circuits. Finally, the key for these LPWAN technologies is low data communication or low limited amount of data communication. This is actually very interesting because in most cases, when we talk about the different mobile communication technologies like 2G, 3G, and 4G, we are looking at how to optimize data communication. Like more throughput is better. So we are going for faster speeds. 5G is coming up, which is promising even faster speeds compared to 4G, because the applications there are very, very different. People are looking at things like streaming 4K videos or playing very, very complicated games online, and those definitely require a very large bandwidth and data communication throughput. But IoT applications, on the other hand, actually don't require that much. I mean, if you look at a simple if you look at agriculture, for instance, you're trying to figure out the soil humidity or soil moisture levels for your field. Even if you take 1 or 2 or 5 readings per day, that is going to be sufficient to give you kind of a pattern to decide how your sprinkling or irrigation strategy should be. Now, this is a very commonly discussed IoT problem, but the key here is that you are only transmitting a few bytes or a few few pieces of information, maybe also temperature and humidity, so a few tens of bytes every few hours. That is extremely, I mean, that is in stark contrast to megabytes of communication that happens per second when we are looking at very high definition movies. So this low data communication, actually, I mean, if you're using 2G or 3G or 4G or any LTE networks or anything else, Wi-Fi, for instance, or Bluetooth, for these kinds of applications, like for IoT applications, you're basically using something, you're using a Lamborghini to go at the speed of a cycle. So it's important that we step back and actually design some cycles which have low data communication throughput, but because we are compromising on data communication throughput, we will get advantages of low power and wide area connectivity. So in essence, these technologies are not competing against Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. They're kind of complementary to them. So cellular networks and short range communication technologies like Bluetooth and Wi-Fi these technologies are basically complementary to them because they are designed from the ground up for something very, very different compared to what Wi-Fi was designed for instance. So LoRa is basically one of those LPWAN technologies that is becoming very popular these days. It operates in the unlicensed wireless spectrum, and it was developed by Semtech. I mean, the modulation technique, I think only 4 or 5 years ago, I think 2015 was when they introduced it. So it's a very, very new communication technology. The key here is, again, both low power and wide area coverage. And along with that, of course, the data throughput not being very high. So LoRa is the communication or the modulation strategy that is used, and LoRaWAN is generally used to refer to the standard protocol that is followed using a LoRa modulation transceiver. So LoRa is basically more like a physical layer strategy, whereas LoRaWAN is a slightly one level up, one level higher than that in terms of communication stack. So for a simple example, I mean, you can think of LoRa as basically the voice that the sound that we produce from our vocal cords, whereas LoRaWAN is the particular language we are using, and we need both of those to be able to communicate soundly with each other. But you can also use LoRa transceivers, particularly if you're forming a peer-to-peer network, and use the modulation in your own applications. I mean, you don't have to follow the entire LoRaWAN stack, which basically includes the preamble, header, the way in which your packet is encrypted, and all of those things are involved in the entire LoRaWAN standard protocol. You can actually make your own protocol, just use LoRa transceivers as modulation strategy and communicate. But given the fact that there is already a standard protocol and it's backed by the LoRa Alliance, which actually includes a lot of very, very big multinational companies and universities across the world. So that actually at least gives us some confidence that our LoRaWAN devices will work sort of interoperably. So notwithstanding the network operator or the device manufacturer, we will still be able to get our LoRaWAN devices to work. Right, so LPWAN is very, very important because, like I was saying, Internet of Things is one of those areas or fields where high data connectivity may not be needed. I mean, in some very, very niche applications of IoT, of course, you need very good throughput. So there you can use things like Wi-Fi. But in most places, in most applications for IoT, data throughput is not very, very important. So we can then use low power wide area networks to support that kind of communication. and we can optimize for things like battery lifetime and range and cost and so on. Right. So this is the LoRaWAN stack. We have the modulation here, then we have some MAC options, or the options that define what kind of device we are going to, or what class of device we are going to use. And then of course we have the application layer sitting on top of it. The key thing here is that if you look at the spectrum that is allocated to the LoRaWAN modulation, it's actually different for different countries or continents. So for the US, it's 915 megahertz. For EU, it's 433, 868. For India, it goes from 865 megahertz to 867 megahertz, which is a 2 megahertz band, and it's basically divided into 8 channels. And then we can basically use one channel for per communication. We'll talk about that in a bit. So one of the problems with LoRaWAN is that because different countries have different frequencies of operation, devices that are made for India or manufactured for a particular country may or may not, basically will not work in any other country. I mean, an exception probably being European devices working in India, but then again, you have to worry about a different channelization plan, and some software hacks have to be done for that to work. So at the moment, that seems to be one of the issues. That is not an issue with Wi-Fi, like we all know. A phone bought in the US works well with Wi-Fi here because the same, ISM band frequencies are used for it. Apart from the fact that the same modulation strategy and the same communication protocol is used. Right. So I'll go over some very quickly some terminology that we'll be using. This will be important throughout the talk, and I mean, so that we can have a clearer understanding of what the entire structure or the network looks like. So we have end devices at one point, I mean, which are the objects that are trying to communicate with the cloud through LoRaWAN. So this could be anything from a sensor network, or a smart chair, or a smart door, or anything that you want to make into an IoT, either a sensor or an actuator, is basically your end device at the moment. Or we'll call it the end device, or the end node, or the moat. The gateway is basically something that communicates with the end device using the LoRaWAN protocol. So, and you can send data back and forth from the end device to the gateway using your LoRaWAN communication. Then we have the network server, which actually routes messages from the gateway to the right application, which also actually decrypts the messages. So, you're based on the information that is there in the header and everything, it will route to the right portal, and then from that to the right application, it can be forwarded using a particular communication protocol. So all of this, after the gateway, we are not using LoRaWAN communication. We'll probably use, say, a TCP/IP backhaul to get information from the gateway to the network and to the application server. And of course, the application is a piece of software that is running on it. So, the example that I was taking, if you have a farm in which you are putting soil sensors that are communicating with the cloud, the application could be something as simple as a dashboard that shows you what your soil moisture levels are, or have been, or maybe you want to make an alert or something that the values are low and whatnot, and something needs to be done about it. So all of that will basically come in the application part. Right. So there is an uplink and a downlink message. Uplink message is the one that goes from the device to an application, whereas a downlink message is from the application to the device. Right. So we'll talk about classes of LoRaWAN devices. This is very, very important in LoRaWAN because herein lies the power of LPWAN technology, or and LoRaWAN in particular. So class A devices basically support bidirectional communication between a device and a gateway. That is fine. I mean, that is done by all classes. But the interesting thing here is the uplink, the communication from the gateway to the device, which is the downlink communication, can only happen after an uplink communication happens, and there is some two receive windows that are open for that for that downlink to occur. If there is no downlink, the device basically just goes to sleep. That includes acknowledgement itself, which is a very important aspect in a part of LoRaWAN strategy, because what we are trying to do here is, in general, your IoT application or an IoT end node will wake up. Say, if you're again using that soil moisture example, if you're in that field and you say every 2 hours I want the soil moisture data, so every 2 hours you can ask your device to wake up. It will wake up from the sleep mode, check the soil moisture, read the soil moisture information, broadcast it on LoRaWAN, and then wait for 2 receive cycles to see if it either gets an acknowledgement of it, or maybe some kind of downlink message is sent for some kind of strategy, and basically goes back to sleep. So that window is only open for that amount of time, and after that we are assuming that the device will always be in the sleep mode, which means there's no sort of handshaking between the device and your gateway, which actually is a key feature in pretty much every other technology that you know of. If you talk about 4G, you know that you have to register on a particular cell tower. If you're not able to find a cell tower, if you go to another city or a country, sometimes it doesn't. So what we do is we go to the network operators list and then manually pick up your network operator. What you're trying to do there is you're trying to establish a handshaking between your mobile phone and the cell tower. The same thing happens with Wi-Fi. When you look at Wi-Fi, you switch on your Wi-Fi, this thing on your mobile phone, it basically gives you the list of SSIDs that are around, that are basically broadcasting that information. What this means is that when you click on that, it basically asks you for a password, and when you enter the right password, you're able to connect to the router. Now, what is happening here is that the router is communicating with the device is communicating with the router fairly continuously. The router has to first broadcast its SSID, the device has to read that, it has to acknowledge it, then it has to basically send the password. The router has to acknowledge that password, it has to say whether it's right or not. When all of those things are done, then the device and the router can finally communicate the actual thing that needs to be communicated. This entire process is totally skipped in LoRaWAN, in at least in Class A devices. In Class A devices, we just wake up, broadcast a signal, and then go back to sleep. And we really don't care whether that gateway has actually received it or not. In a sense, you can say that there is a flaw in the system, that there is no guarantee that there is a gateway. There can be LoRaWAN devices basically out in the open where there is no network or nothing. They will also do the same thing. They will wake up, broadcast the signal, and then go back to sleep. They will not do anything different. And the entire onus of actually having a network there and then making usable archiving of that data falls on the users themselves, not on the device. So because this handshaking is not there, we actually save up on a lot of power. Because you can imagine every communication that happens between the gateway and the device requires a lot of power, even for receiving the signals as well as sending them from the end node application. Which means because you're not doing handshaking, you are actually skipping a lot of quote-unquote unnecessary communication between the device and the gateway, and then you're basically avoiding to use all of that power, which means you can actually save a lot of battery life by doing this strategy. So if you have Class A device, it just wakes up, transmits, goes back to sleep. There is no guarantee that somebody will catch that information or get that broadcast up on the cloud. But then that is the penalty or the trade-off that we are willing to live with. If you are not willing to live with that, there is always Class B devices, which basically have a scheduled receive window apart from the actual receive window that the uplink transmission after the uplink transmission. So every day at a designated time or every hour or something like that. You can have a receive window in which the device will wake up and just receive, or just basically open its eyes and look around for a transmission from the gateway. If it gets it, great. If it doesn't, it will go back to sleep. So you are basically now giving yourselves more chance of communicating back with the device, saying, "Oh, by the way, I missed that last transmission. Can you resend it?" And then, depending on what the embedded code is, the device will be re-energized and resend the last information that was missing. So all of those things can be done with Class B devices. So you will have a time synchronized, sort of a receive window scheduled for all the downlink messages. And then we have finally the Class C ones, in which downlink and uplink can happen basically at any time. The device is up and ready at all times. These are generally devices that don't really care about power. Particularly if you're talking about grid connected applications, we'll talk about one of those applications in a bit. But if you're talking about grid connected IoT systems, then we don't worry about battery life or bad power all that much. And at that time, we can basically use Class C communication, where downlink can happen all the time. So you can have guaranteed communication. You can put it in embedded code that unless you get an acknowledgement from the gateway that it has received that information, you keep sending it. So all of those things are possible, which means you'll basically sacrifice on power consumption, but you will get at least guaranteed communication through your device. So all of those strategies are available in LoRaWAN. Right, like I said, in India, we have the the channel for LoRaWAN transmission from 865 to 867 megahertz. These are basically divided into 8 different channels that have the bandwidth of 125 kilohertz respectively. Right, so it's a sub-gigahertz unlicensed spectrum. The nice thing about that is, because it's unlicensed, you can actually run your entire, you can run your own LoRaWAN network, right? I mean, so for instance, like it's like setting up a Wi-Fi router. So you can set up an entire, gateway for LoRaWAN. Of course, getting messages, decrypting them, and storing or forwarding them to the right application requires a network server, which can be complicated to create, but theoretically you can do it. If you don't want to do it, you can always do a peer-to-peer LoRaWAN communication, in which you don't even worry about having LoRaWAN as your standard protocol. You can just have any protocol that you define using LoRa modulation. You can basically use any two transceivers that are running on LoRa modulation and basically get some communication going. And we actually did that in one of my projects that I did for a startup. We were looking at communicating some IoT information from one building to another. These buildings were situated like 2 kilometers apart, which means Wi-Fi was not going to work. And they really need the information, so they were thinking of actually going through putting up a wired connection. I mean, all the way across the building and everything. So they had to dig up the entire thing and then put a wire there and all that. So that would have taken a lot of time and effort and money. So instead of that, what we did is we just put two LoRaWAN devices, one at one end and one at the other, that were basically just peer-to-peer network. I mean, so we didn't have a standard LoRaWAN communication or a standard protocol in place. All we need to do is communicate some very basic digital information across across the two buildings. And because LoRaWAN provides a large range, we were able to get that fairly cheaply done. So these kinds of very quick, applications can be thought of because of the fact that it's unlicensed. So we don't have to worry about, licensed spectrums and or licensing that particular spectrum. Fine. So continuing with LoRaWAN terminology, one of the things that we have to worry about is, of course, the transmission power that we can use. So the transmit power is the maximum power that the end node can transmit. Hello? And one of the other things is basically receiver sensitivity, or the sensitivity at the receiver end is also a very, very critical factor. Now, these two basically determine the range that you are going to get for your LoRaWAN transmission, right? So, particularly receiver sensitivity is very, very important, because what ends up happening is something like this. So, you will have your transmission going out of the antenna of the transmitter at a particular power. That obviously attenuates over free space, I mean, because of the 1 by R square law, and ends up at the receiver end with some power that the receiver is basically able to collect. If that power is enough for the receiver to demodulate your signal, you will basically get a reception. Otherwise, you will not. So, for instance, so that level at which the receiver is basically still just about able to demodulate the signal or receive the signal successfully is called the receiver sensitivity. So below that power level, if your receiver receives it here, you will not be able to get successful reception. In which case we say, oh, the network range is over. I mean, a very simple example is you set up a Wi-Fi router, start walking away from it. You will, if you are very close to the Wi-Fi router, you get a very high receive power, and then it basically shows in the network amount of towers that you have. As you go away from it, your received power goes low, and at some point it basically goes below the receiver sensitivity, at which point it shows that there is no Wi-Fi reception here. So we have all faced that issue. So we know this is why it happens. I mean, because the power that has been transmitted is not now enough for the receiver to be able to successfully demodulate the signal. Obviously, there is free path loss, which is the 1 by R square one. But if there are obstacles or walls or anything else in the path, then you can actually get a drop in your transmitted power, or the power that is traveling through the air, which means your range then becomes even lower, because your power goes below the receiver sensitivity faster, right? So that is why we call this, like, from the point that we have transmitted to the receiver sensitivity, we call this entire amount of power, or in this entire segment, as the link budget. Okay, so it provides a clue of about the quality of the channel of communication, or the communication channel that we are using. It basically provides some information about it, and the link budget, like I said, will depend on two things: how much power you are transmitting with, and what is the receiver sensitivity. Unfortunately, we can't transmit with very, very high power, because obviously we will kill our battery life like that. But it will also require more antenna gain, larger transceiver circuit, and everything else. So the entire the end device or the end node will become more complicated and more power consuming and more expensive if we try to do that. So we are not allowed to, we generally don't go above, say, 10, like close to 10 dBm, 20 dBm of transmit power. So that is the best we generally do. So your link budget basically ends up being a function of your receiver sensitivity. Receiver sensitivities actually depends on the signal to noise ratio in the channel. So for instance, if your receiver is somehow able to figure out what part is the signal and what part is noise very well, you will get better receiver sensitivity, because even for the very, very small amount of power that has been received at the receiver will be able to demodulate it, right? So you will be able to get whatever message has been transmitted, or understand whatever message has been transmitted, even for a very, very low amount of power that has been received. So your signal to noise ratio is actually a very, very important factor in determining receiver sensitivity, which basically determines your link budget. And finally, this SNR is then governed by the modulation strategies that you're using. So at the end of the day, if you want a higher link budget, it all boils down to what modulation strategy you're using. And this is where LoRaWAN really hits the nail on the head. The way LoRaWAN modulation works, we are able to get link budgets of as high as 150 dpm or even more than that, which can actually give you a theoretical range of line of sight 800 kilometers for a single gateway, which of course is not practically achievable. I mean, this is a best case scenario because of structures being in the way and walls and whatnot and trees and everything else and all kinds of other inefficiencies in the channel. But this is a very, very impressive number. I mean, for you can imagine compared to the range that we generally get with a Wi-Fi router, this is just phenomenal. In fact, the current world record for a successful LoRaWAN transmission is 832 kilometers. So the distance between the end device and the gateway in this case was 832 kilometers. Of course, they used, the maximum transmission power that was available. I'm guessing they would have probably used some, directional antenna instead of a dipole antenna and some other techniques, but still it's fairly impressive that you can get sort of across an entire country. You'll be able to get one communication if you can get that kind of a range. So where does this, how does this come about? This comes about because of the fact that we are talking about a very interesting modulation strategy here, right? So the modulation strategy that is generally used in normal digital communication is basically in FSK, for instance, which basically means that you are going to jump from one frequency to another to indicate a 0 or a 1. So if you're transmitting a 0, you will be at one particular frequency, and if you're transmitting a 1, slightly different frequency. So if your channel plan hypothetically is going from 800 megahertz to 801 megahertz, you will transmit, say, 800 megahertz for 0 and 801 for 1, and that's how you'll go back and forth in those frequencies and get your communication done. So that is your FSK strategy. There are many, many kinds of FSK and modulation strategies, including how to go from one frequency to another. Can we basically have a skip step and all the other things in the middle. So all kinds of digital communication strategies have been talked about or are there in literature, but I'm giving you the simplest possible example. But in LoRaWAN, what we do is we use a CSS modulation, or the chirp spread spectrum modulation, which basically provides robustness to interface, so high signal to noise ratio, and because of that we get long distance communication. And CSS is, of course, has not been invented by Semtech or hasn't been invented for LoRaWAN. It has been in use for space and military applications for a while now, but commercial applications, LoRaWAN is one of the first to do it. So this is what your CSS configuration will look like. So for instance, on the in this graph, we have on the x-axis we have frequency, on the y-axis we have time. So this is basically in time, it's going from one frequency to another frequency linearly, right? So it's not jumping from one to another and back as FSK would have done. It's basically traversing all the frequencies from one end of the band to another in a given amount of time. So that is an up chirp. If you basically go from high frequencies to low frequency in time, then you're basically doing a down chirp. So these are the two chirps that we'll use to basically modulate whatever information we want in terms of LoRaWAN. Obviously, I mean, from engineering, you can see that there are two key parameters associated with this chirp. One is the duration, that is, this is the duration, the duration from in which you're going from your high frequency to low frequency. That is called the sweep rate. And the bandwidth associated with it. So the difference between the highest and the lowest frequency in the band, that is your bandwidth. So what kind of bandwidth you have for this particular channel. So these two are the parameters that are associated with this up chirp. Right. Now, so CSS is generally ideal for low power usage, needing very low relative data rates. right? So 1 megabit per second is actually fairly large, because in IoT applications we're talking about 1 bit per second, and even lower than that sometimes. So CSS is generally used for these kinds of applications, because you can imagine if you're going through the entire frequency band, you will take some time. I mean, depending on the sweep rate, of course, but it will take some time just for one chirp to complete. So you can't expect a very, very high data rate just because of the fact that you're going through the entire bandwidth linearly. Right. So like I said, if you zoom in, this is the sweep rate and this is the bandwidth that we have. Of course, higher, like we would like to have a higher sweep rate for better decoding, which means you will get a better signal to noise ratio if your sweep rate is higher, which means you will get a better receive sensitivity, obviously. But if you have a higher sweep rate, obviously your data rate will be lower. And you can imagine that one chirp will take even more time, and if it takes more time, you will get even less data communicated over time. So your data rate will become lower. So that is the trade-off here. In terms of bandwidth, of course, higher bandwidth is better again for being able to decouple or decode the signal well. But we all know that bandwidths are a scarce resource. So, we have bandwidths of the order of 125 kilohertz, 250 or 500 kilohertz in LoRaWAN. So, and 125 being the most commonly used. So, we have these bandwidths that are kind of fixed. So, depending on the channelization plan of a particular country or a region. So, given that it's a scarce resource, it's generally fixed. So in actual LoRaWAN transmission in frequency will look like this. So you'll have some up chirps going like this with time. You will break them. This is where the information is decoded, where the up chirps are breaking. And you're getting some information decoded where they're breaking and for how long they're breaking and everything. And whether there's a down chirp and all of those things will define your communication, like what you're communicating. And in time domain, it will look like this. I mean, because frequency is changing sort of linearly with time, so you will see some signal that looks like this time domain. Right. So, like I said, when we are communicating information with LoRaWAN, we are basically using those breakages in your up chirps to determine or to encode information there. This is where the information is now getting encoded. Now, if this is the signal that we transmit, this will be received by, say, the LoRaWAN receiver or the gateway. What it does at the receiver end is that it will basically have an inverse chirp signal that is basically constantly being generated at the gateway. Right? So we'll take this signal and then we will basically mix it with the signal that is getting received at the antenna. So once we go through that mixing, I mean, we know that when we mix signals in frequency domain, their frequency gets added. So we can imagine when we add this thing to this thing, because this is linearly increasing and this is linearly decreasing at the same rate, we will basically get a straight line, right? But if there is a shift in the up chirp, that straight line will basically get shifted, right? So the level of that line will now be different. And based on that, we will be able to say decode or get the information that we are trying to obtain. So, for instance, if you have these two levels, you can say if we transmit this is 0, this is 1, or if you have multiple more levels around here, you can say 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, and all of those things have been transmitted. So, depending on how you want to decode your information or encode your information, you can get that strategy going. But this is actually the key behind LoRaWAN modulation. The up chirp, the staggered up chirp that are being transmitted at the node, and the inverse chirp that is being used and mixed to get the signal levels out. You can imagine that if there is a noise in this channel, that will not really cause a lot of trouble, because this kind of a planar structure can only be obtained if we get some kind of a structure in the frequency that looks like this. Any noise will have either a constant frequency, constant amplitude for a short time, and then basically disappear. So there will be There'll be chirps of constant frequency and amplitude that will probably have a Gaussian distribution over both amplitude and frequency. But eventually what will happen is that noise will not be able to sort of create this kind of a structure, which means it will not be able to, it will get neglected when we are basically decoding symbols. So when we do that, we will get a very high signal to noise ratio, which is very robust from any noise that can be there in the channel, which means our receive sensitivity will be very high. And we all know that receive sensitivity basically means higher link budget, and higher link budget means higher distance. So this is where your 800 kilometer range or that link budget of 150 dBm is really coming to the fore. Right, like I said, you can have a bandwidth of 125 kilohertz. You will have up chirp and down chirp during that bandwidth itself. Now, in terms of communication, there are three parameters that we can tweak. We can talk about, or we can change the transmission power, the bandwidth, or the spreading factor. The transmission power we talked about. I mean, we said we can go like say all the way up to I think 23 dBm. That is supported by most devices. So we can go up to 23 dBm, but that is the best we can do. So if you put it at that level, the bandwidth and the spreading factor are the other two things that we can control. But bandwidth again is dependent on the channelization plan, which is also fixed for most countries. So you cannot do much there either. So it's only like say you're working with 125 kilohertz as the bandwidth. So eventually you end up looking at the spreading factor as a key parameter that you can change, which spreading factor basically determines the sweep rate. The sweep rate that the amount of time that an up chirp or a down chirp takes, that is the sweep rate, and that is basically indicated by the spreading factor. So if you have a lower transmission power, you will save battery, but the range of the signal will be lower, and because it will dissipate below the receiver sensitivity faster. So if there are obstacles in the path, that can be lower still, because again dissipation will take place even faster. The bandwidth is the width of the channel, and the spreading factor is the amount of time that it takes for one chirp to happen. So the sweep rate. Both of them combine to give you the data rate. I mean, you can imagine if you have a lower bandwidth and a lower spreading factor or a faster sweep rate, you can get more information through, but you will have more problem decoding them, which means your receiver sensitivity will go up, which means your link budget will go down, and then again same problem. So all of those things, all of these knobs sort of combine together to give you a particular data rate at a particular receive sensitivity. So whether you want more receive sensitivity or more data rate is then up to you. And out of these, like I said, spreading factor is one of those things that is the easiest to control at the end device level. So for instance, in LoRaWAN, you have all of these spreading factors, SF7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, all for the same bandwidth, for instance. They will give you different data rates. Okay, so LoRa operates with spreading factors from 7 to 12. 7 is the shortest time on air, 12 is the longest. And each step, and because 12 is the longest time on air, it will give you the lowest data rate, but it will guarantee the best reception at the gateway. So the choice is ours then, which spreading factor we want to use. So like I said, for India, the channel plan is from 865 to 861 megahertz divided into 8 channels of 125 kilohertz respectively. Right, so this is the LoRa, we were talking about LoRa modulation. Now this is the LoRaWAN, the actual protocol, and that is sitting on top of that modulation strategy. So this is a modulation strategy, and this is your protocol stack. Right, so you have some kind of payload that is basically part of a MAC payload, which includes a frame header and whatnot. So everything said and done, it basically becomes a fairly large packet, including a preamble and everything else and information that contains things like your device ID and all of those things and so on, so that the network server is able to determine which application this particular packet belongs to. So it will look something like this. So you'll have a preamble of, I think, 6 up chirps and 2 down chirps are your preamble. So you can see all of these up chirps and 2 down chirps are your preamble. And then you start with an actual encoding of the information, which, like I said, is the staggering of the up and down chirps in a particular fashion. Now, the actual payload that is being communicated is very, very small for a particular LoRaWAN packet. So this entire packet is actually communicating of the order of, I mean, the biggest payload that you can work with is close to 50 bytes in one packet of LoRaWAN transmission, which means in 50 bytes you have to encode all of the information, which clearly means that you're probably not going to use it for streaming movies and audio and whatnot. You will basically use it for sending information like temperature information, or whether or not there is a car parked in a parking lot, or your soil moisture information or something like that. So, and that information can be, say, only a few bytes. I mean, temperature information, for instance, can only be 2 or 4 bytes depending on the precision that you're trying to communicate. And things like whether or not a particular parking lot is occupied by a car is only 1 bit information, because it's either 0 or 1. So that is very easy to transmit using LoRaWAN. So the transmission that we are talking about is actually sitting here, right? So you have your gateway here and your end devices here. That can be a sensor or an asset tracking device or water meter or whatever else. And say, for instance, this water meter is communicating the current consumption of water through your LoRaWAN transmission to the gateway. The gateway collects that information, sends it to the network server through a TCP/IP backhaul, and that network server then decouples or decrypts that information and sends it to the right application server depending on the information that it gets from that packet. So this is the entire sort of infrastructure that your LoRaWAN network will work with. So there are a few network operators that actually give you, so quote unquote connectivity, LoRaWAN connectivity across India. I mean, there are, so these two are private entities. I mean, Sendra and Tata Telecommunications both provide LoRaWAN connectivity across many, many cities in India. And this is basically, the Things Network is basically an initiative that provides free LoRaWAN coverage or free LoRaWAN network server for basically any gateway that wants to communicate with it. So this is a very interesting sort of a crowdsourced network in which a few people have basically made a network server for LoRaWAN and basically put it in public domain, such that anybody can connect their gateway to this network server. So we have one gateway, for instance, in IIIT Hyderabad that is connected to the Things network, which means any information that is basically received by that gateway for a device, of course, that is registered with the network, you will get that information directly on the Things network. And this was basically started by a few folks in Amsterdam, just as an experiment and whatnot, and to see if more people or their neighborhood basically connects to the network server. Eventually, it turned out that entire cities and countries and the entire continent of Europe, connected to it, and then now the entire world is connecting to the Things network. So it's one of those initiatives that has basically gone global from a garage startup, and it's very interesting. I mean, because they're utilizing the fact that LoRaWAN communication is in unlicensed spectrum, so we don't really need to pay for it. We can just get our gateway, and then the network service anyway provided by them. So we can get a lot of. I encourage all of you guys to have your own LoRaWAN gateways, maybe connected to the Things network, and see if you can do some simple experiments, IoT experiments, using LoRaWAN transceivers. The way in which the gateway needs to be ported to the network, all of that information is very easily available on their website. So this is the part which these networks are providing. Right? So the devices have to be ours, and the application server or the application itself has to be made by us. Everything in the middle is basically provided by these network operators. All right. So let's look at some applications that are very interesting, particularly from an IoT point of view. One of the first I would like to talk about is wearable technology, right? I mean, in wearables, in body monitoring wearables or any other technology, we would love to have a very low power communication strategy, because battery recharging or battery performance is one of the key bottlenecks right now in wearable technology, wearable IoT devices in particular. So we are talking about body monitoring, body vitals monitoring. We can have, for instance, a band or a watch or even an embedded sort of a system inside our skin that will basically keep taking our body vitals and sending it to the cloud through LoRaWAN, and then you don't have to worry about recharging the battery or replacing the battery ever again, because again the life of the device is the same as the battery. So this basically makes it a very, very promising technology for wearable applications. And again, very remote sensing is of course very important application in IoT, and that can be taken care of by LoRaWAN as well. Again, because of the fact that we can just put a soil moisture sensor here and forget about it, right? So it's a deploy and forget strategy that we can use with LoRaWAN. And what will end up happening is it will basically wake up, for instance, every day in the morning, broadcast the soil moisture information that it's sensing there, and then go back to sleep. Now, all you need to do is basically have a gateway anywhere in the 5, 10, 15, 20 kilometer range of this very, very remote farm, and you will be in good shape. You will be able to get information from here, and you will not have to worry about, again, going back all the way to the farm and replacing the battery or connecting it to the grid and whatnot. So remote sensing applications are very, very important in LoRaWAN as well. Then we have parking sensors that are catching on as very, very interesting applications for LoRaWAN, particularly because, I mean, I've seen parking sensors that are actually embedded inside the street itself. So while you are paving the street, before you pave the street, you put a parking sensor here, right, and inside the street, and then on top of it you pave it, because again it's a sensor that's supposed to last 10 years. So you're not worried about connecting it to the grid or recharging it or replacing it and whatnot. So the life of the structure and the life of the device is the same. So then it basically wakes up every 1 hour or so, sees whether there is any car parked on top of it through electromagnetic sensing, and then if yes, it communicates a 1, if no, it communicates a 0, and then goes back to sleep. It requires tremendously low amount of power, and then that's why it can work for an entire generation basically. So by the time this parking lot gets developed into another building, it will still be working. And then I've seen applications that are interesting in terms of, say, hygiene, this thing as well, applications as well. So for instance, we have applications where we are putting sensors in garbage cans just to see when they're full. So instead of municipality people going to each of the garbage cans in the entire city just to see whether, visually inspect whether they're full or not, and then collect them, they plan their route first by knowing which of them are full, and then just going and collecting them. That will make it more efficient as well as reliable for us as well. So all of these very, very interesting technologies and applications are coming up, and hopefully in the next 5 to 10 years they'll become more ubiquitous. You will see the impact of these technologies more and more. Now, our contribution as an institute to this is that we have set up what we call the Smart Campus Initiative in IIIT. This is backed by MIT, the Ministry for Information and Electronics Technology, and the Smart City Initiative of India. Both of them are keenly backing this project. In this, what we do is we are basically completely wiring the institute with sensors and actuators to monitor everything from air quality to water quality, power consumption, power generation, and water flow, and all of those things. So what we'll do with that information is we'll basically dashboard it in a central control room, and we'll archive it as well, and we can run algorithms on it to see whether there are some system inefficiencies that we can correct, and we can actually also give out that information or that data set to other companies or universities across the world to run their algorithms on it, and then see if they can come up with some interesting insights there as well. So it's a very, very interesting initiative that we have set up. We are calling it the Living Lab because again we hope that the entire campus can behave like a lab, and then can be used for mesoscale POCs as well by some startups that are going to deploy their systems in smart cities. They can use this as a POC and a test bed to see whether they're working here. One of the things that we are doing as part of that initiative is we are of course having two LoRaWAN network providers. One is Centraco, is providing the network on campus, and we also have the Things network. So basically, like I said, a gateway that we have connected to or ported to the Things network server. So these two LoRaWAN connectivity providers are there. We have recently put some smart energy meters on LoRaWAN network. I mean, they were originally normal meters. I mean, the ones that have to be manually inspected, and then somebody basically goes and writes the information there, and then we get the metering or the billing system done like that. But now we have replaced them with smart meters. We actually get the entire energy consumption on the campus in a centralized dashboard. Well, the dashboard is still being made, but we'll eventually get it. And these meters are basically programmed to provide data every 15 minutes. Previously, we had once per month. Now we have every 15 minutes data, which will give us these are three-phase meters. So all the RVY phases, we will get information like the voltage and current at all of those phases, along with power factor, average power factor, peak demand, and of course the energy consumed and the VAR consumed and whatnot. So all of these information we will get at a granularity of 15 minutes, and I think we can do a lot of things and design a lot of smart algorithms to see how we can optimize our power consumption once we have this information in hand. All right, so that's all I had for today's discussion. Please let me know if you have any questions. You can unmute yourself and ask them. I'll probably be sharing this presentation with the organizers of the FDP, so you guys can have a copy of it. My email address is here as well as on the IIIT website, so you can contact me with with questions there as well. Thank you for listening.
Audience, you can ask your questions right now. Sir, there are a few questions in the chat box.
Okay. What are the difference between LoRa and LoRaWAN? Like I said, LoRa is the modulation technology. So, and LoRaWAN is the standard protocol that is on top of it. So, for instance, you can use LoRa for a different, using a different protocol. I mean, you can set up your own protocol. And when I say protocol, I mean, for instance, what the header will look like, what the encryption methodology will be there, what the size of the payload should be. You can have any kind of mutually agreed upon protocol between the receiver and the transmitter, and it will still work using LoRa modulation. However, LoRaWAN is a specifically set standard of protocol, which basically gives you all of this. It has set defined all of these things in advance. So what the header will look like, what the payload will look like, what kind of encryption can happen, all of those things are already defined in LoRaWAN. Your project is complete. No, the campus project is not complete yet. I mean, we have started it like a year ago. We have done deployments of the smart meter that I showed. We have done deployments of TDS meters for monitoring our water consumption, the drinking water consumption. Now we are looking at, we have done also air quality monitoring, deployments. So now we are looking at deployments for water quality monitoring and water flow monitoring as well. Apart from completing the energy meters one, I mean the energy meter that I just showed in the picture, we have only deployed 4 of them right now. We have ordered 80 of them, but we are basically waiting for the shipment and everything else. Of course, coronavirus has basically shifted all of the timelines, a bit delayed everything. But we are now on track, say in the next 3 to 6 months to be able to complete all of those deployments. Do we have LoRaWAN devices for India specifically with the support available of transmission? Yes. So we do have LoRaWAN India specific LoRaWAN devices. The smart energy meters that we have deployed are an example of that. So we have dedicated, I mean, there are some startup companies that have come up with their boards or transceiver boards that you can use, and using that you can basically create your own IoT application, for instance. So you can have Arduino, for instance, communicate with those transceiver, and then the transceiver is going to communicate with your LoRaWAN gateway. So that is one possibility. Then there are SoCs that are made by Microchip, which is actually a global chip manufacturing company, but they do have specific SoCs for Indian frequencies for LoRaWAN transmission, and they actually include a processor as well on that SoC, so we can actually get some very, very minimal processing done apart from transceiver functionality. So we are getting an entire ecosystem is developing. And this is the right time. I mean, as faculty, we should probably all invest time and effort into understanding and learning these things, because now is the right time to get into these things, because they're at the moment mostly on academic/research bed domain. So for these energy meters, for instance, I've had to pull together like 3 or 4 different companies. One was the meter manufacturer, one was the chip manufacturer, one was the module manufacturer, and one was the network provider. And all of them sort of came together. I had to communicate with all of them personally. It's not something that you can just buy off the shelf. I mean, because there's no repository or demand of these things as such. So we have to design things from scratch. We have to test them, make sure that everything is working. That's why we only deployed 4 of them first, just to make sure that they are working in real life environment. And once we are happy with their deployment, we can basically scale up. So right now, we are happy with the deployment that we are doing, and we are now scaling it up. So it's a slow process, but I think it's a very important process. Most of the things that we have done are all manufactured in India. The entire meter that you saw has been completely manufactured in India, including the LoRaWAN transceiver module also, and of course the meter itself. So it's a very, very some Make in India initiative as well somewhere there. Is it practical to convert such a network to a test bed for research? Yeah, I mean, I would definitely encourage that. I mean, if you can get a gateway for LoRaWAN, I mean, you can get LoRa gateways for something like not very expensive, something like 50,000 rupees for an institute. That's not a lot of money. You can set up these kind of gateways with a TCP/IP backhaul or an Ethernet backhaul, and then port it to the Things network. And then anything on your campus, I mean, any LoRaWAN device on your campus that is registered with that network, you will be able to communicate with that device directly through the Things network. So it's a very simple, step-by-step process is always available everywhere on blogs these days. So you can look it up and check it out. Yeah, there are actually that's a very interesting question. In terms of research avenues for software, it's a very green field right now. One of the key things that we are struggling with in LoRaWAN is, like I said, because LoRaWAN transmission has that limitation of something like 50 bytes per packet. If you want to communicate anything that is larger, you have to then do some very smart things, including things like breaking apart the packet, bringing about the information, putting it in different packets, getting that those packets at the gateway or the network server, and then trying to restitch them, the information. So all of those things are there. The other thing is, for instance, these meters. You can imagine if I'm getting voltage, current, power factor, all of those information, I have to squeeze them into a 50 byte package, which means we have designed, so to say, an entire strategy in which we are saying that, okay, the first 2 bytes are, red phase voltage, the second or the third and fourth byte is the yellow phase voltage and all of those things, and then the current and then the power factor. So we have to squeeze everything together in terms of bytes in that 50 byte packet, and then send it. And then at the receiver end, obviously, we have to decouple them. So we have to figure out how to make sure that this coupling and decoupling takes place automatically. That, I think, is where a lot of intelligence needs to go into the software and the firmware that we deploy using LoRaWAN.
So
Yes.
I think there are no more questions. So Aftab sir, shall I wind up the session?
Yeah, please.
So it was a great session. So in fact, when we were planning the FTP, we wanted that there should be a session on LoRaWAN, and we were trying to find out a person. And thanks to Aftab sir, he readily agreed that he will be taking a session on LoRaWAN, and we were quite excited. In fact, we thought that without specifying protocol which was used for low-powered wide area communication like LoRaWAN, this FTP would be incomplete. Anyway, it is our luck that we have got Dr. Aftab to speak on such a good topic. And in fact, he has also introduced the various applications that is implemented in his institute. And I wish him the very best for his initiatives and his work in this area. I thank him on behalf of the organizers as well as all the participants. Thank you, sir, for the wonderful presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.